pirate. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to an episode of Dirt Nation Off-Road. So today what we're going to be doing is working on the Tacoma. We've got some suspension work to do. Now, before we get into the suspension work, we're actually going to talk about the 37's and an update on the 37's and where we're at with that. Now, King of the Hammers. It was about a month and a half ago. We did the unveiling of the Tacoma, of the Gladiator. Both trucks look great, and both trucks had the same tire. We had some 37-inch Yokohama Geolander XMTs, and with that we had an asterisk on the Tacoma part of it. We were talking about how we were going to get long travel suspension, and we had made a lot of plans, and we kind of threw the truck together for the show in anticipation of things being a little different than they are right now. What ended up happening with that is the same thing that's been happening to all of you out there, and it's just COVID. And because of COVID, everything is behind right now. You want to get parts, it's 12, 13, 16, freaking 20. It's a whole year out. I think Fox suspension is currently 5 to 6 months out when you order something, which is ridiculous. So because of that, Solo Motorsports is having the same problem. They're really behind on a lot of stuff, so their long travel kit was taking a very, very, very long time. And that's no fault of theirs. It's just the current climate and how everything is. Everybody's behind on everything. And because of that, we had to make some adjustments as well, because we were in a point where we have this truck sitting on 37-inch tires. You couldn't really wheel it hard. You couldn't rock crawl it. And that's just the reality of it. The tires were just too big for the suspension that I had. The rubbing issues, you know, the strain on suspension and everything like that. I mean, those tires are already going to be pushing it to the max with the long travel kit. So with a mid-travel Bilstein shock setup, it wasn't gonna cut it. And because of that, we had to make some adjustments. So the adjustments that we made is we're still getting the long travel kit. We're just gonna have to wait a little bit longer for it. And because of that, in the meantime, you can see behind there, and you might have seen on a couple previous videos, we did knock down the truck back to 35s. So you can see right here, this is my spare tire. It's a 35-inch Yokohama XMT. And I ended up selling my 37s to Jesse, who drives the Prospector Power Wagon. So you'll see on future videos that he'll have those, and he's been wheeling those. But I mean, obviously going back down to 35s is kind of a bummer. You know, everybody loved the 37s look. I love the 37s look. I definitely wanted to wheel it like that and make it work. But it just wasn't gonna happen right now, and that's okay. You know, it's an experiment that kind of failed for now. We're going to approach it again in the future. Plus, I mean, we have things with winters going on, and we have, you know, what we're doing today going on. So we have some good things going on with the trucks, and obviously the Gladiator, it's a beast. So we don't have to worry about that part right now. And then we got the XJ and all the things that we're working on behind the scenes with that. So, I mean, all these trucks, they're going to look great. They're going to be doing a lot of good things in the future. So 37's on the Tacoma. We're going to approach it again soon. Stay tuned for that. But for now, we're gonna rock the 35s and we're gonna send it. Now, what we're gonna be doing today is installing some bad boy Kings on the Tacoma. We're gonna be doing front and rear. Today, we're just gonna start with the front. Now that being, we're gonna be working on the truck a little bit later, because the rears, we're actually gonna be doing Deaver leaf springs in the rear with a shock hoop and 10-inch King shocks with a piggyback reservoir, whatever the hell they call it. Anyways, we'll get into that later. But what we're gonna be doing today is we're gonna be installing these bad boys. Now, I couldn't wait, so I already kind of unboxed them, and we'll get into them in a second. But there that is. You guys know what that means, right? That means travel, baby, and comfort and good ride. So let me get these out of the box. I'll show you guys what's going on, and then we'll go from there. And there it is, simple as that. Got our two shocks, which are coilovers, and they have the reservoirs, and then you have the reservoir mounts, and then we have some hardware. Now you'll notice on here it says 2010 FJ 4Runner Land Cruiser. I'm gonna give you a secret. It's all the same stuff. So you can do these on an FJ, you can do them on a 4Runner, you can do them on a Tacoma, and then I guess a Land Cruiser is included in that too. But either way, the Kings will work for whatever. And then we have hardware, some stickers, and then we have the this is like the wrench thing so that you can adjust the coilovers, so you can bring them up or bring them down. But these are looking so nice. Very good construction. And of course, on the reservoir, right where it's gonna pop, it says King, because God knows the whole point of getting Kings is showing everybody that you have Kings. Anyways, we're gonna get the truck jacked up. I'm gonna already take off the tire. I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff before we check back in, and then we'll get started on installing these, and we're good to go. So on Toyotas, there is a driver and a passenger side. You want this nozzle thingamabobber. Pretty much you want the tube facing forward so that the reservoir can go like that. So you have to mount them like this. So they're just gonna go in. I'm gonna get my hardware ready. Now there's hardware for the top, otherwise you use the factory hardware for the bottom. Now to adjust the preload, because these are adjustable shocks, so you can see all these threads that you have to work with. I'm gonna adjust the preload just a little bit because I have 550-pound springs. I've thought about going 700. I'm gonna test it out like this. If I have to go 700 later, then I'll do that. But for now, I'm gonna loosen this Allen right here, and then you just turn it to adjust the preload, and then that'll lift the shock up. All right, shock is in. We bolted the bottom, we bolted up the top. You have the provided hardware with washers, and they're all 14. So I tightened those, I didn't tighten this. And then now we're just working on giving it some preload, because this is gonna need quite a bit to cover what we're doing. All right, Paul's here with me. Broken hand Paul.
Broken wrist.
Yeah, broken wrist Paul. We got shit to do this week, Paul. You're out here breaking shit.
Tomorrow.
All right, so we left off yesterday. You guys saw me adjusting the preload on the Kings, and to be honest, I adjusted it quite a bit. It was like 1.5 inches of preload. I wasn't happy with how the truck sat on one side, so I put it on, turned it on, I turned the wheel and everything, and I wasn't happy with it. So I ended up taking off the shocks, taking them back to Solo, and I put some 700-pound coils on there. And I just kind of went with my gut. At first I was just trying it out with the 500s or the 550s, and I was going to see how it was. I wasn't happy with it, so took them back. We got the 700-pound coils. Now these are black. That's what they had in stock. I know you're supposed to have blue with Kings, but who freaking cares? If they work, they work. So we're going to get back to throwing those on. We'll jack up the truck, do all that stuff. You guys are going to not see any of that. So next you'll see we'll be throwing on the shock and going from there. Let's get it. Okay, 15 minutes later, it's time to mount some Kings. So we're going to start throwing this bitch in. Let's get it. So as you can see here, we already mounted our shock reservoir. We ended up having to take the plate off from the Weston bumper. So I'm already talking with Weston as well as Paul about doing like an adapter plate that'll move the shock reservoir a little bit out. So it'll sit on the outside of this plate. But until then, we're just gonna rock it like this, and then we'll monitor the bumper, make sure everything's gonna be okay. Now, because this is a 700-pound spring, these might not sit in there too good. We'll find out though. I already did like a turn test. It's still kind of rubbing over here. You can see from the chunking and stuff. I'm gonna figure that out in a sec, or by the time we get to the end of this video, I'll probably figure that out. But everything's mounted up. I did have to put some preload in there to lift it higher. I think this is 20 threads that I went, which is couple inches, so that's quite a bit of preload. But I know the springs are going to settle a little bit, so we'll adjust it as we need to. Now that's the hard part of coilovers, is that you do have to fine tune them here and there. So we're going to drive throughout the week and then we'll get them tuned in. But I'm going to go put it on the other side, and then we'll check in if there's anything that happens differently. But other than that, that's it for now. There's side number 2 put on. I did 18 threads instead of 20 to account for the taco lean. But I mean, like I said, with coilovers, you have to constantly adjust them, especially after it settles. So the only hope that I have right now is that it doesn't rub too terribly. I mean, if it does, then we'll have to go and adjust them again. Now, the only problem with that is, I'm gonna tell you right now, for King, Fox, all the coilovers, with the tool that they give you, this thing right here. So you saw, this is how you adjust it. You know, you turn it back and forth using this, but it starts to get really hard to turn. This thing bends and it is strenuous, especially with a 700-pound spring. You know, putting that amount of preload on there is just a pain in the butt. I mean, obviously you can go a lot more. Look at how deep these threads go. Now, do you want to do that much? No, because it's going to coil up your spring more and it's going to be a stiffer ride. Now, with all the weight, it doesn't matter that I have a stiffer ride, but my point is, it is a pain in the butt to adjust these coilovers. So just keep that in mind. And we have our shock, the reservoir mounted. That's just fine. But we did have to take off that Weston bracket. So we'll figure out a solution for that, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna throw the tire on. We're gonna do a test drive, and then we'll talk a little more about the shocks and how they're doing in the front later in the video. And then later we're gonna work on the rear, and I'll show you guys what we have going on once we get all the parts for that. All right, we are continuing Tacoma things. Now, last you saw, we were tuning the shocks a little bit on the Kings. Now those are pretty much dialed in now. They just have to settle, and then we'll adjust them from there. But for now, those are solid. And now we're gonna start working on the rear. Now the rear, our plans kind of got a little bit messed up because the Kings that I bought, I took them over to DC Shock Services. They're a little bit running behind right now, so they weren't able to rebuild them in time. So for now, I'm just have to continue rocking my Bilsteins that I have in here. But what we're gonna be doing today is a leaf spring swap with this Tacoma right here. That this one's Paul's. So Paul got a Tacoma just to kind of rebuild it and flip it, but he's got a set of Devers on here, and he's got a lifted shackle, and then this is the shock hoop that I'm going to be using. Well, not using. He's gonna make me one. So I'm gonna have a shock hoop on the Tacoma with those 10-inch Kings, but for now we can't do that part. So you'll see that later in the video. But for now, we're gonna do the Dever swap. And then in addition to the Devers, we're also going to get into something that we've been kind of lagging on, something I should have installed a long time ago, and that's our new bump stops from Sumo Springs. So these are pretty dope. Now they give us 2 sets. So one is designed for like stockish, you know, off-roading, and then this is like if you have a lot of weight in the back. So let's say you have like a rooftop tent or something like that, then you're going to want to use these. But we're going to install these as well. We have new U-bolts and everything like that. So we're gonna get started with jacking up both trucks, swapping the leaf springs, and going from there. So we're gonna get started with taking off the shock. We have a 17, and you have to use an Allen key to hold the stud, and then you have 17s on the bottom, and then you have 19s to take the U-bolts out, and then we'll also have to take off the bump stop, which will be a 14 right here. And then once the bump stop's unbolted, the axle will be lowered on both sides, and then we can start with the leaf spring, which the leaf spring is 19s all around, and then the leaf spring will come right out. Very good. All right, look at that. Leaf springs are torn out. We got one leaf spring torn out right there, but let me show you guys what we got. So this is the stock leaf pack out of my truck. It has a Icon add a leaf, and then we took off our Bay Area metal fab shackles, and then we're gonna put them on these set of Devers right here. Now they look rusty, but they'll do the job. What did you say is a full pre-runner pack?
11 leaf pre-runner pack.
What he said. So these shackles, I'll end up using these eventually. Well, you have to do some fabrication on the hanger to do those. So for now, I'm going to use those. He's getting my stock ones, and then we're going to throw those on that truck, and then throw the good ones on my truck. Bada bing, bada boom. It's going right there.
That was a real nice feeling.
Let me get mine in first. Oh, she said. Are you guys catching me? We're reporting here live from Paul's house, and this is prep for George's birthday, Sand Hollow birthday bash, weekend of forgiveness for Rudy.
I'll just do it the old-fashioned way.
Anyways, we got the Dever in. We got our BAMF shackle in, and then he's working on the front leaf spring. And then look at how many leaves there are. That's 11 thin leaves. Apparently, Paul said this is a full pre-runner pack, so I'm gonna be able to jump the truck, and he takes responsibility for all things involved. Anyways, we're actually working on replacing our bump stop. So this is our old bump stop. So we used to have the Timbrens on there, and we cracked one side in Baja like 2 years ago, and I've been running them ever since. But that's the plate, and then this used to come over the axle and then through there. But we're going back to the stock style setup, and we got these from Sumo Springs. It'll go like that, 2 U-bolts with the plate underneath, and then the bump stop like that. So we're gonna get those put on both sides, and then we'll be solid. All right, so we're back all bolted up. Devers are in. Now, something that I stupidly did not record was we did a droop test, and the droop is ridiculous. These things drop so far that all the brake lines are extended and everything like that. Now, once obviously we get the shocks on the correct way, Paul said we'll do some limit straps or something like that to make sure it's not breaking anything. But what was the number? 15?
15 metal to metal.
Metal to metal, 15 inches of travel. And then with this right here, that's like 7 inches of travel. But that'll be fine for this weekend. So, all right, so we're back at it with the Kings. Now we're gonna be installing the rear. Now what's interesting about the rear is we're gonna be doing these right here. We're gonna be doing a shock hoop. And then with that, we're gonna be installing these big boys. So I bought these used off of Paul, and I got them rebuilt at DC Shock Services. And these are 2.5 10-inch stroke Kings. So these are a piggyback. So there's a reservoir, but there's no hose or anything like that. So I don't have to worry about mounting them. Now the problem is it's an eyelet to an eyelet as opposed to an eyelet with a stem, which is stock. Plus these are too long anyways, which is why you have to run a shock hoop. Normally the shock mounts right here on the Tacoma. With this setup, the shock's gonna mount probably up here because this hoop is gonna weld in right there, all the way across, weld in right there, and it's gonna be way up here. We're gonna get started with jacking up the truck, taking off the tires and doing everything like that. Then we'll get started.
We're gonna cut that off. Shock mount off.
Okay.
So
and then the rear tabs also. Have to cut those off. Furthering our ruining of the Tacoma warranty. Very good. So here's our shocks. There's our tabs. Ah, my retinas!
Yeah, that's why I fire in the hole.
I know, I'm kidding. I'm making intro content, Paul. That's all. So now in the intro, I'm gonna be screaming, "Ow, my retinas!"
No sé cómo se llama esa madre, pero
So this is from Rogue Fabrication in Oregon.
eso.
Tubing notcher, pretty bitchin'. Works
Sí.
great.
Sí. And that's what we call a fish mount.
So wrapping up the welds on our DIY shock hoops.
With some snow
This
cones.
is a solo special. So almost ready to put the shock hoop on. So there's our bottom shock mount. Then we got those parts sanded, and then shock hoop is built. Ready to go. So we got one side essentially done. We're gonna have to paint it, but I'm not gonna do that today because we're a little bit low on time. So we'll do that another day. But for now, we got our shock hoop welded in, got our tabs in, everything's all cleaned up. We did have to, so this is like the bump stop where it strikes. So we had to shorten this a little bit just for the shock to clear. And then there's our bottom tabs. Those are all welded up. We're gonna take this out right now. And then we're gonna throw the shock actually in, and then we're gonna put the bump stop and the U-bolts and everything like that in. And then Paul's gonna get started, do the same thing on the other side. But after that, that'll be pretty much it for the install, and then flex test and jump test and everything else that we're gonna do. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Check it out. So this is all bolted up, ready to go. Now I gotta put nitrogen in the shock, but other than that, what? Paul's being a clown. Anyways, that's all good to go. Got it all tightened up. I even put my rock light back on, so that's bueno. Looking sassy. Right. We're here, Solo Motorsports. Put some nitrogen in the shocks. Got those all filled up, but check out the droop. We measured it, 12 inches of droop currently, but we do have the forklift, and you guys know what that means if we have the forklift, right? Hit it, Paul. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Has that maxed out yet? It hasn't, right? Now keep going. More.
Anybody be inside with the brake on?
I put the e-brake on.
Yeah, that's in the back.
Yeah, but that's not going anywhere. It's wedged.
That's true.
Keep going. Poquito más. Almost.
Alright, you good? You good?
Did it lift yet?
You're putting that tire in.
Okay.
That tire's in?
Woo!
Yeah.
Damn, son! Let's go. All right. The droop, the flex is real. Now, we'll do a test on the rear shocks with the front shocks and see how it rides, and then we'll close the video from there. Big shout out to Paul for making this happen. Also, big shout out to Flacco and Ted. Ted's not here, but
AKA my hand hurts.
yeah. Flacco, aka don't touch my back, it hurts.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do the test. We'll be back. Let's get it. All right. So before we wrap up this video, I want to take a moment to quickly talk about my first impressions with this full suspension setup, because, you know, you guys saw we started off with the front Kings, then we did the Devers, and then since then we went out a couple times. We went to Utah, we were in San Hollow doing some dune stuff, some rock crawling, and then we went out to Johnson Valley doing some more high-paced stuff as well as some more dunes and a little bit of rock crawling. And then we came back, we installed the rear shocks with the DIY shock hoop. Since then, we've done one more trail. We went out to Rattlesnake Canyon, which starts in Lucerne Valley or Johnson Valley if you want to look at it that way. Starts on the backside of Big Bear, and then you run the trail, goes into Big Bear. We have a video on that coming soon, but it's a pretty cool trail because it has a little bit of high-speed stuff, some scenic, trail driving, and then it has some optional rock crawling that you can do along the way. So it's a really good opportunity for me to test out the rear suspension with the front suspension and everything that goes with that. So we're going to take a moment to talk about what I've learned with the suspension and kind of where we're going with that, and then we'll wrap it up from there. Now, starting off kind of with the front and what I've learned with that, a 700-pound spring has some very big upgrades and also has some drawbacks. Now, the upgrades of that is you don't necessarily have to worry about, your sway bar lean and stuff like that. It kind of eliminates that completely because it keeps the vehicle level even when you're turning, so it doesn't feel as unsafe when you're not running a sway bar. Some other benefits of the 700-pound spring is it keeps your height nice and tall where it's supposed to be, especially when you have heavy front bumpers, winches, skid plates, and big drivers and everything like that. It keeps you nice and tall. The other thing with 700-pound springs is that it makes your suspension very, very forgiving. It can soak up bumps so well. And that's the one thing that I really like about these springs, but it has a drawback to it. Now, when I was out in Johnson Valley and even in Rattlesnake Canyon, when you're coming up on a bump and you hit something, like let's say you make a mistake and you come at something a little bit too fast, it makes the suspension very, very forgiving because those 700-pound springs just soak up bumps. They're so, because the suspension is just so like out there and it's ready to take a hit all the time. Now, the drawback of that is because I'm running a 700-pound spring and I have about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of preload, the suspension's really, really stiff, and daily driving and slower trail driving, especially with some bumps, like there was some washboard stuff going through Rattlesnake Canyon where you can't necessarily go fast, but when you're running through it kind of slow, it does make it really bumpy and stuff like that because the suspension, like I said, it's so stiff, it's ready to like jump, it's ready to take big hits because of how tough that spring is. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to what you're doing. So what I'll say with that is consider your trail driving and what you're doing compared to your daily driving and what is set up on your vehicle and stuff like that before you choose a spring. 700-pound spring, I wouldn't change anything. I would still keep it that way. I just know what to expect when it comes to the different types of driving. So all good there. Front shocks, 100% great. A lot better than anything else I've ran on the truck. Now it has a proper height. I can adjust the height when I want to. I have reservoirs and I can go through some pretty gnarly whoops and stuff like that, and it eats it up pretty darn well. Now for the rear shock setup, this is a huge, huge boost to the truck. Now before, we put on the Bay Area Metal Fab shackles and we did the Adaleaf and we put the little bit longer Kings in there, and ever since then, it's had decent flex. It's always never really been a problem, but I didn't realize what I was missing until we threw on the Devers and we put on these shocks, because we went from around 7, 8, maybe 9 inches of travel, and that's from bump stop, from the bottom of the bump stop to the frame. That's max droop. It was about like 8, 9 inches to now having 12, 13 inches of usable travel. That means you have almost 50% more travel, which is quite a bit. And you can see it when we flexed out the vehicle on the forklift, as well as when we're flexing out on the trail. And we also went to the park over here and doing that stuff. The truck flexes very, very well in the rear. And with that, the bump stops eat things up way better than my old Tim Bren ones. They were rubber. and they were broken because I cracked one in half in Baja. These new ones, the Sumo Springs, they do very well. They compress, even though they're big old things. Let me see. Let me show you how big they are. So this is these are like the heavy duty ones that you use for if you have like a tent or something like that. So I use more of the trail driving ones, but that's how big they are. These compress 80% of the size. And I did test this when we were on the forklift. This thing compressed so damn much. And this isn't really, I don't even know what these are made out of. If I look it up, I'll put it right there. But these things, good material. They flex very, very well, and they're very, very good at soaking up bumps. As for the DIY shock hoop, Paul did a really, really good job. I mean, he's done this 100 times. He works with race vehicles and stuff like that, so he knows the orientation of how to put the shock and the mass so you can get the max droop, and you're not getting too much like, you know, leaf spring folding or whatever. Was it axle wrap and stuff like that? Like, you're not really dealing with much of that. And I did make sure to, you know, you guys can see I put a camera on the bottom just to watch the rear axle, watch how the suspension travels, and see, is there anything unnatural going on, or is there anything funky going on? Didn't have any of that. The shocks did very, very well, flexed really good, soaked up bumps really good, and I was really impressed with it. Now in the future, what I definitely want to do is I do want to have a dedicated pre-running day just to really test out this suspension for a day's worth of fast-paced work. And you know, I've done it before with Baja and some other stuff with 420 motors. It's been a while, but I'm definitely looking forward to doing something like that again. Now, when I say fast paced, that's probably not as fast paced as what you guys are thinking. I mean, I know there's maybe Raptor drivers or like dedicated pre-runner guys like, oh yeah, I can go out there and go 70, 80 miles an hour. I'm not going to do that. Okay, I go 75 on the freeway. I'm not going 75 on a trail. That's just not realistic. I'm geared. My truck's not meant to go that fast. But if I can comfortably go 50, maybe even 60 miles an hour on a trail, I'm pretty good with that, and I'd be pretty happy with it. You know, when we were out in Rattlesnake Canyon, I was going around 55 miles an hour in the beginning when I had a lot of open space, and it was mostly flat road, and the truck handled it very, very well. But that's pretty much the first thoughts on the suspension. Really impressed with it so far. Looking forward to continue testing it. You'll definitely see that here. Maybe we'll do an update video if there's anything super important that we have to talk about. But other than that, I mean, we'll continue to update throughout the videos. When we do something where it's like a dedicated pre-running day, or we're, you know, purposely going fast, we'll do that. And then, I mean, the one thing to get out of the way, I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, we do have to send the truck to the moon at least once. I haven't jumped the truck yet, but it's something that I definitely want to at least do once, especially with this suspension setup. The front is pretty set up to where it can take a big hit, so I might fuck something up, I might break it, but it's something that I've wanted to do. We haven't jumped the Tacoma yet, so we're gonna jump the Taco. But look forward to that. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any concerns, anything like that, make sure to comment below. As for Paul, who helped out with all of this stuff, the Deaver install, the freaking DIY shock hoop, big shout out to him. This dude was helping me with a broken hand, and a big shout out to everyone else that came out. Rudy came out and helped out, Ted, Flacco, if anybody else came out, I'm sorry if I forgot you. I think it was just those guys that came out and helped out on this one, but big shout out to those guys. We'll link all them below. I'll put Paul's Instagram below if you guys are interested in getting your own shock hoop done. I don't know if he can personally do it, but maybe he can refer you to Solo where they can get it done. They have pretty fair prices, and they do really, really good work. Very similar to what Paul does on my truck. So definitely check that out below. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. You also hit us up for shirts, hats, hoodies, and all those other goodies at dirtnationoffroad@gmail.com. Thank you guys. See you again next time.